The film begins by showing a young ballet dancer named Abigail performing on a stage. Meanwhile, in another location, a group of unidentified individuals prepares to carry out their plan to kidnap Abigail. Once Abigail returns home, the group makes its move. Although Abigail's parents, who have just arrived, briefly notice the kidnapping attempt, the perpetrators manage to flee and force Abigail into their vehicle. They then take her to a secluded house in a remote area. Next, they meet Lambert, who is the mastermind behind the abduction. Afterward, they lock Abigail in a room and gather in the living area to receive Lambert's instructions. Lambert tells the 6 kidnappers they must stay there for 24 hours, until they receive ransom money from Abigail's parents. He also forbids them to use their real names. After Lambert leaves, the 6 of them congregate in a bar area while chatting. Suddenly, Dean makes a personal remark about Joey. However, Joey replies that Dean does not really understand her. Frank responds by placing a $100 bet, challenging Joey to guess his background. Not wanting to be outdone, Sammy and Peter join the wager as well. Joey reluctantly accepts, then proceeds to deduce each person's history. Unexpectedly, Joey is able to identify their backgrounds one by one, beginning with Frank, a former police officer, followed by Peter, who once worked as a bodyguard, and then Sammy, who comes from a wealthy family. Lastly, Joey exposes that Dean is not truly successful in his motorcycle racing career. Feeling humiliated, Frank retaliates by speculating about Joey's own past, asserting that she struggles with a personal dependency. Finding their conversation unproductive, Joey excuses herself to check on Abigail.
I'm gonna go check on the girl.
Upon arriving, Abigail asks who Joey is and where she is. Unfortunately, Joey refuses to respond. Abigail then requests her blindfold be removed. Out of concern, Joey complies, promising to protect Abigail and release her once the ransom arrives. However, Abigail also apologizes in advance for whatever might befall Joey and the others.
Sorry about what's gonna happen to you.
Troubled by this, Joey returns to her companions and questions Frank about Abigail's parents, suspecting, as Abigail hinted, that her father could be ruthless. Frank dismisses this, insisting Abigail merely wants to frighten Joey. Yet once Joey leaves, Frank grows suspicious and decides to see Abigail himself. Upon entering her room, he panics upon discovering the blindfold is gone, leading him to point his firearm at Abigail for fear she has seen his face.
Look away! Don't fucking look at me! Fuck Joey! I do want to know! Who the fuck is your father?
Okay.
After stepping out of Abigail's room, Frank suddenly declares that he wants to leave. This naturally arouses suspicion among Joey and the others. Frank then explains they have abducted the wrong person because their captive is actually the daughter of Christophe Lazare, a figure who leads a dangerous organization and is rumored to engage in occult practices. Startled by this revelation, the group finds itself divided. Joey suggests that they abandon the house altogether. However, Frank disagrees, pointing out that Abigail has already seen his face. He insists they remain until they receive the ransom. To that end, he orders everyone to keep watch at every corner of the house. Shortly thereafter, they begin following Frank's instructions. While they focus on their guard duties, Sammy is startled by Dean, who suddenly tries to scare her. Angered, Sammy pushes him away from his post. Dean then heads into the kitchen area. At that moment, he notices the kitchen door moving on its own. Driven by curiosity, he goes to check, but only finds a stray mouse. Irritated by the false alarm, he prepares to leave. However, before he can go, something abruptly yanks him out of sight.
Help me!
Hearing Dean scream, Sammy rushes to the kitchen. Upon arriving, she sees no one there. Sammy then considers returning to her station, but is startled yet again when Dean appears near the dining table. Furious, she approaches him, only to witness Dean's head somehow separate from his body, causing Sammy to cry out in shock. Her shout is heard by Peter, who quickly comes to check on her. Sammy begs Peter to inform the others about Dean's fate. It does not take long for everyone to gather in the kitchen. While analyzing who could have harmed Dean, Rickles suggests it must be one of Christophe Lazare's associates, named Valdez. He explains that a similar incident once befell 12 FBI agents, when they attempted to apprehend members of Christophe Lazar's organization.
That's his signature. Valdez.
Hearing Rickles' account, Joey thought it was possible someone had already set Abigail free. As a result, they decided to check on her in the room. However, upon arrival, they found Abigail still inside. Feeling uneasy, Rickles moved to leave. Yet when he tried opening the exit door, he discovered it was locked, indicating they were all trapped in the house. Disturbed, Rickles rushed to retrieve his firearm from where he had been standing guard, only to find it had disappeared from that spot. Meanwhile, Joey returned to Abigail's room to ask if anyone else had visited her. Without hesitation, Abigail revealed that Frank had entered earlier, claiming to be working for her father. Alarmed, Joey was taken aback, but her reaction was cut short when Rickles called her over. He explained that his weapon was now missing, and in turn, Joey disclosed that, according to Abigail, Frank was actually Valdez, a known associate of her father. Feeling deceived, they planned to confront Frank. However, before they could take more than a few steps, Rickles suddenly froze in place. Noticing that something was amiss, Joey hurried closer, only to be shocked when she found Rickles in a severely harmed state, no longer conscious. Panicked, Joey immediately went looking for Frank and finally located him, accusing him of deliberately setting everyone up. Frank firmly denied it, insisting that Abigail had influenced Joey's thinking. He then ordered Peter to eliminate Abigail at once. Peter hastened to carry out Frank's instruction. However, Joey intervened just in time, causing a heated dispute between them.
Try not to have to fucking shoot you.
So caught up were they in this confrontation that they failed to notice Abigail quietly removing the restraints on her wrists. Freed from her handcuffs, Abigail transformed into a vampire and lunged at Peter, provoking Frank to fire his weapon and strike Abigail's head. Startlingly, her head regenerated almost at once, allowing her to rise again and focus on preying upon them. In desperation, Joey fired a shot of her own and managed to lock Abigail inside the same room. Briefly safe, they realized they had targeted the wrong person all along, for their captive was in fact a vampire. Undeterred, Frank urged them to destroy Abigail outright, but Joey disagreed, convinced they would fail. Frank persisted anyway, instructing Peter to craft a makeshift spear from a pool cue and telling Sammy to gather garlic from the kitchen. Once prepared, the three confronted Abigail and attempted an attack. Unfortunately, she overpowered them, yet they escaped with their lives and rejoined Joey. At that point, Joey suggested sedating Abigail again with the same anesthetic used during her original abduction. Conceding that it might be their best option, they agreed and split up to find her. Sammy, wandering through a dim corridor, suddenly tumbled into a pool brimming with numerous remains. Meanwhile, Peter, busy on his own, was confronted by Abigail in her vampire form, prompting him to flee in alarm.
Vampire on my...
During his frantic escape, Peter stumbled after Frank inadvertently pushed open a door in his path, though he was unharmed by the fall. Abigail, seeing Peter sprawled on the floor, redirected her attention and managed to capture Frank instead. Moments later, Joey appeared from behind and attempted to inject Abigail with the anesthetic. Unfortunately, the syringe slipped and ended up behind a locked door. Sammy soon arrived to help, only for Abigail to bite her unexpectedly. Luckily, Peter reacted swiftly and managed to restrain the vampire. At that instant, Joey recovered the anesthetic and injected Abigail, rendering her suddenly weak and powerless. They then confined her in a makeshift cage, and Joey declared she would set Abigail free if she revealed the route out of the house. Rather than comply, Abigail refused and instead exposed everyone's true identity, further insisting that Lambert was actually under her command. She went on to offer safety to anyone who would release her. Upon hearing Abigail's offer, Peter was briefly tempted to let her go, but Joey fired a warning shot and then helped Sammy carry Peter to another room for treatment. Left on his own, Frank guarded Abigail. She tried to persuade him to unlock the cage, but he demanded first to know how to leave the house. Without hesitation, Abigail shared an exit route, only to discover that Frank had deceived her. Enraged by his trick, she forced her way out of the enclosure. Fortunately, Frank survived thanks to Joey's intervention, and together they escaped until they reached a library room. Frank immediately searched for the secret passage Abigail had mentioned earlier, but found nothing, which led him to believe she had misled him. Suddenly, Sammy proposed an idea. They should disable the house's power source, hoping the security system that kept them locked inside would no longer work. Agreeing to this plan, they split into two groups in search of the main power source. While Sammy and Peter investigated, Sammy felt unusual and heard Abigail's voice calling to her. In that instant, she transformed into a vampire and attacked Peter. Joey and Frank, upon hearing Peter's cries, rushed over. Both of them grew suspicious of Sammy's behavior, recalling that Abigail had previously bitten her. As Sammy turned, Joey and Frank realized she had indeed become a vampire. Panicking, they ran, with Sammy in pursuit. Upon reaching the library, Joey quickly grabbed an aluminum tray and reflected sunlight towards Sammy, causing her body to disintegrate right then and there.
That was fucking...
Just then, a hidden doorway in the library opened on its own. Believing this to be their only means of escape, they ventured inside and soon encountered Lambert, who turned out to be a vampire as well. He seized Joey by the neck, then invited Frank to join him as a fellow vampire, with a plan to fight against Abigail and Christophe Lazar to seize their tremendous wealth. Hearing Lambert's proposal, Frank agreed, and Lambert swiftly bit him to complete the transformation. However, once Frank had become a vampire, he unexpectedly ended Lambert's life. Moments later, Abigail arrived. Unaware that Frank was now a vampire, she attempted to attack him, but he countered by drawing her blood instead. Seizing the opportunity, Joey hurried to deactivate the house's security system, then tried to leave the hidden area. Unfortunately, the exit door there was securely bolted, allowing Frank to capture Joey and strike her with significant force. In her helpless state, Joey was thrown from the second floor, though she survived when Abigail caught hold of her just before she hit the ground. Abigail then asked Joey to work with her in overcoming Frank. Without hesitation, Joey agreed, and the two confronted Frank together. However, Frank was very powerful, and he swiftly overpowered them both. Joey was pinned against the wall by a spear through her shoulder, while Abigail once again had her blood taken by Frank. Afterward, Frank bit Joey, intending to turn her into his follower. Hoping to control her, he ordered Joey to finish Abigail. Unbeknownst to him, Joey only pretended to be under his influence. She abruptly turned to strike Frank, though he deflected her attack. At that moment, Abigail bit Frank and took some of his blood, leaving him somewhat weakened. Seizing the chance, Abigail grabbed the spear and drove it into Frank, causing him to collapse completely.
Oh, fuck.
Thank you.
At last, they succeeded in defeating Frank, and Joey believed everything was finally over. Unexpectedly, Christophe Lazar, Abigail's father, appeared, prepared to target Joey next. However, Abigail immediately stood in his way, pleading with him to spare Joey's life. With no other choice, Christophe Lazar complied, instructing Joey to leave before he changed his mind. And that was how the film concluded.
Till dinner time.
See you around, Joey.
What the fuck?
If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. Because by subscribing, you have supported me to make better videos. See you in the next video.